I have exactly 3 months to learn how to play the double bass. Upright bass? Contrabass? Bowl? Fiddle? Whatever you call this, I need to learn it like ASAP. And to make things worse, I don't just have to learn double bass, I have to learn percussive double bass, which, if you're unfamiliar, sounds a bit like this. And I only have 3 months to do it because in exactly 3 months, I'll have a video call with the guy who basically invented this entire style of playing, Adam Ben Ezra, where I'll be showcasing my newly found skills to this absolute legend of bass and hopefully not get roasted for it.
There are more things to learn and to develop in your technique. Get a better bass. In your case, you could feel it's stiff. Well, I think it's gonna take a lot of work.
Oh boy. Let's do the thing. Adam is a monster bass player, and for my money is the unquestioned king of this particular style. The final boss of the ultimate evolution of slap bass, if you will. It's rhythmic, it's funky, it's got a lot of melody to it, and it's charming, and it looks challenging as hell. Could I master a whole new instrument in just a few months? Probably not. Was I gonna try? You bet your bottom end I was. All right, so I just drove 2.5 hours to take a look at this bass, and it's not without its problems, but it was really cheap, so I picked it up. Lesson number 1, don't do this. The last thing you want when learning a new instrument is to have it fight you, and let me be the first to tell you, this thing kicked my ass. In the double bass world, you get what you pay for, so invest in yourself a little bit and get a proper instrument. Let me pull over and then we can do the reveal. God damn, why is this thing so heavy? Ugh. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. Absolutely amazing. All right, let's try and play this thing. Okay, there we go. Let's give it a go. Okay. So, confession time. As some of you who've been watching this channel for a minute probably already know, I do play a little bit of electric bass. So I thought this transition for me was actually gonna be pretty smooth. I just heard something rolling around in there, that's probably not. But as I'd almost immediately find out, the double bass is a completely different beast. Ow! So, here goes my attempt to tame it. All right, okay, we're done. Let's go back to the car. As I mentioned, this thing was in a bit of a sorry state when I got it, so I took the first couple days to try and set up myself and the bass for success. I noticed that the scaling on the double bass seems to be a bit different than what I'm maybe used to on electric. So if I were to play G to A on my electric, my hand would have about this much spread, but on an upright, it seems to be way larger. That was definitely gonna be an adjustment for me. Another big adjustment was that the double bass doesn't have any frets, which scared me. So I put in some frets. But don't fret, not like actual frets. I put in these imaginary frets and fret dots with whiteout and a pencil. I know this might be looked down upon in the double bass community, but honestly, I don't really care. At the end of the day, if I can play more in tune with dots, then I'm gonna have dots because what matters is the music and not what people might think of me. Feel free to air your grievances out in the comment section below. I tried to adjust the bridge some so the action would be a bit lower, which is what I'm used to coming from electric. And then I noticed something concerning. Okay, so I've played the bass a few times now, and I've been noticing some slippage, for lack of a better term. Feels like the end pin is kind of slipping out and the bass is kind of running away from me when I'm playing. It could be because I, have no idea what I'm doing and I'm probably holding it wrong, but I'm thinking it could be because of this little end pin stopper thing. I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but I am pretty sure that it's not supposed to be made out of electrical tape and a penny. So I replaced that one with a new one and am 1 penny richer, I guess. This bass has been clearly well loved. It's made of plywood, which to my understanding is like a bottom of the barrel tone wood, which is the only type of wood you can make a bass out of, which actually depreciates with age. But in retrospect, that was probably a good thing, considering I'd be slapping the ever-living shit out of this thing for the next 3 months. I probably wouldn't feel so bad if I punched a hole in it. Oops, 2 holes, I guess. The bass came with a pickup already installed in it, but frankly, it sounded terrible. So I swapped it out for this mountable mic and much better. Now that we were all set up, it was time for the fun. How well could Levi play in tune? Today we are attempting the F major scale. I've got about an hour to practice, so I'm hoping by the end I can lock down a nice, well-intonated 2-octave F major. Let's take a first crack at it. Okay, all right. Okay, we got 3 notes. Let's try that again. All right, okay, so that's not horrible. I can tell my habits from electric bass are crossing over, and I'm kind of doing these jumps, which I'm probably not supposed to do. So I'm going to figure out what I should do. Hold on. 1 quick skimming of Simandl later. Okay, that's a bit better. All right, so one of the things that I'm finding immediately that's really foreign is this concept of putting down your other fingers behind the finger that's actually fretting the note. So, for instance, on this E note right here, on electric bass, I would probably just play it like that and just have this finger kind of, floating in the air, which is probably not good form anyway. I'm not sure, but either way, it's a habit that I brought over. And so the proper way, as I understand it, would be to rest that index finger behind it, so you kind of have the strength of the whole hand in play right there. So that's definitely something I have to get used to. Yeah, and of course intonation. Let me attempt a 2-octave run. This is not going to be good. Let's see. A little bit of chromaticism. All right, let's try that again with feeling and proper positional technique, I guess. Okay, all right, not bad. All right, let's get the metronome involved here. Always practice slow. Maybe that's a little too fast for me.
1 eternity later.
right, so it's been about a solid hour of practicing. My hand is a bit tired, but I don't want to just play scales all the time, so I'm gonna just kind of try and jam, see what happens. That's the one thing that I kind of already have down from electric bass is kind of the snare hit that you do. So you 1, 2, 3, the kind of I can kind of do a backbeat already by slapping it. So I'm sure that's going to go a long way when I start doing the more percussive kind of double bass stuff. But it serves me decently right now. So back to the jam. Keep proper position, Levi. Oh, look at that. Look, it's underneath. Bass players, does this happen often? Oh my God. After my first practice session, I was feeling a lot of discomfort. I was expecting some finger pain, but the sheer physicality required to get a decent sound out of this behemoth of an instrument was just very taxing on my body. I was experiencing lower back pain, a tightness in my wrist, and my leg was sore because I kept locking it into place so I could rest the weight of the bass onto it. I immediately realized I was doing something wrong, but I didn't quite know what, so I sought out some professional advice from my friend Jason Heath over at Double Bass HQ.
Almost feel like you're leaning into the bass a little bit. Just a little bit, like if you're gonna like shoot a basket, just a little bit up on the balls of your feet. Not much, but just a little bit, and that's just sort of a nice athletic kind of way to approach the bass.
Jason walked me through some of the ergonomics involved when your bass is so big that it's basically its own amplifier.
And if you're playing, you know, like jazz bass or percussive bass or anything, like it's such a physical instrument, the double bass, that you want to make sure that you are as relaxed as possible, because that's the way to damage your body, is like be just a little bit tight in the shoulders or a little bit off balance.
So it's like every so often kind of reset yourself. Make sure you're not accidentally developing any habits that'll be detrimental to your playing, not even your playing, just your physical health.
Yeah. And breaks are good when you're picking up the double bass. You know, like I remember my first double bass lesson, my teacher was my orchestra director, and she was a violinist, and she was trying to show me how to put down the fingers, and she was like, "This is horrible," and I was saying, "This is horrible," and we were all just like wounding each other physically trying to play this thing.
Just a few minutes into our call, it became very apparent to me that I had pretty much been doing almost everything wrong. I was holding it wrong. My finger positions were wrong. My posture was wrong.
So having a good left hand orientation and posture is key, and I think it's more critical than it is on electric bass, where you can see sort of different approaches to the left hand and people can kind of like get away with doing a wide variety of things. On upright bass, you're going to want to keep your thumb pretty much opposite your second finger, and you really want your left hand to look like a C. So I've got my thumb on the back of the neck. People ask, do I have to be on my thumb tip or my pad? Whatever's comfortable for you is cool. Just make sure that when you start to put down the left hand notes, you're not squeezing and you're not letting the bass sit on the thumb. So that's why that Goldilocks balance is so important. You want to just make sure the bass is kind of neutral here, so when you put down a finger, it's okay.
I knew something was off with my left elbow, but I couldn't quite pinpoint it. It turns out that was the culprit behind my wrist pain. I've seen, just in watching other double basses go, usually the arm is up. How should I approach that? Is there where should it be? How do I get into that?
Right. That is the habit to avoid, is this, because that will eliminate all, if you want tendonitis, that's a good way to get it. If you want to never play fast or in tune, that's a good way to get it. And so, yeah, but it is a little bit confusing because you want the arm to be perpendicular to the neck. So not perpendicular to the floor, which would be way too high, just perpendicular to the neck. And it's one of those things that I think the best way to develop this is just take your fingers and just tap on the bass. Just go, and I love to do this with students who are starting out, just go up here to the neck block, tap on the side of the fingerboard, tap on a string with your hand, just take all 4 fingers and tap, and it's very difficult to do that and be in a really weird position with your arm. So just getting comfortable with the bass, these little games that we play, this is something that to this day, when I'm warming up for the symphony or something, I'll pull my bass out. I had a concert yesterday, I was doing that. I just pulled my bass out, did a little tapping, and it's just if you can do this, you've essentially got a good double bass technique foundation going.
I wasn't even plucking it correctly.
If you're thinking about stuff like what Adam Ben Ezra does or jazz kind of context, your thumb just rests against the fingerboard here, and you actually give it a thumbs down is sort of the position you want to be in. So the thumb is like that, and you're going to take, why don't we just pluck the D string, for example. You take your first finger, and you don't play perpendicular. Generally, you play with a little bit of an angle. You get a little more flesh on the string. So try that. Just pluck the D string and let your finger just kind of land on that A string. Yep, exactly. And think about the way that drum set players' arm looks when they play a ride cymbal. That's kind of the motion you want, tang, tang. And if you watch a great jazz bassist and a great jazz drummer, you'll see their right arms are kind of moving in a very similar way. So we don't want to just do the finger. That's a good way to get tendonitis because you're doing that all night on the gig. You want to actually engage the arm a little bit and just and it's subtle. You don't have to go crazy, but just feel like it's really coming from the bigger muscles.
Fortunately, we ironed out most of the kinks in this call, and I left feeling simultaneously 100 times better and also 100 times worse about this challenge.
And welcome to the confusing world of double bass, by the way. Everything about this instrument is confusing.
This was going to be a lot of work, certainly more work than 3 months would allow, and I hadn't even begun on the percussion yet. The really neat thing about the upright is it's kind of just this big box, which is also kind of what drums are. So there's a lot of potential here to get very rhythmic. I needed to understand exactly how to fuse bass and drum into one instrument. So I became a disciple at the Church of Adam Ben Ezra. I watched every single video this man has ever produced and studied his approach intently. And while I'm still nowhere near the level required to attempt most of his pieces, there were kernels of wisdom in each that I began to slowly add to my toolbox. For instance, Adam usually gets his signature kick drum sound lower on the bass with some sort of palm strike, while hitting the edge of the bass here for more of a snare sound. Got it. Kick, snare, very important, into the toolbox it went. In songs like Balagusto, he holds notes over the percussive elements to blend everything together in a way that makes it seem like there's 2 things happening at once. This opened my eyes to the importance of leaning on open string notes in this style. Held notes over percussive grooves, open strings, sounds like another for the toolbox. In his cover of Andy McKee's Drifting, Adam does this really cool triplet thing. Definite toolbox move. The way he breaks up his hand into 2 or more independent gestures in songs like Can't Stop Running is probably the most toolbox thing. This is a simplified version, But the pivot between the thumb and the finger, I'm just going back and forth here, is like foundational to the Adam Ben Ezra sound and allows us to play much faster with one hand than we'd be able to do otherwise. I toolboxed it and I drilled it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Over and over and over again. No matter how much I worked with it, I seemed to keep hitting a ceiling at how fast I could go with this technique. This percussive style reminded me of some of the techniques I've seen used on these little frame drums, which are popular in the Carnatic tradition of southern India. It's called the kanjira. The kanjira is also played with one hand, alternating between thumb hits, palm strikes, and finger taps. And people can play this thing really fast. Like, ridiculously fast. Like, even faster than that. So I went down the rabbit hole of rabbit holes and started watching a bunch of these Kanjira tutorial videos to see if I could, I don't know, pick up some tips and tricks on how to loosen up while playing, or maybe figure out the secret for playing in this style at higher tempos. But I kind of realized that trying to learn a whole new instrument, for the express purposes, by the way, of learning another new instrument, is probably a stupid idea, especially considering time was ticking and I only had about a month and a half left of this challenge. Still, seeing the fluidity and mastery of something like this definitely gave me a big confidence boost in what I could achieve rhythmically with just one hand. Adam has said in past interviews that he taught himself how to play percussion on the bass itself, but later that he picked up certain techniques from learning how to play the tabla, an instrument whose DNA is not so far away from this little frame drum. And with that said, you guessed it, toolbox. I practiced a couple hours a week this month on the fundamentals and a couple hours a week as a bargain brand cajon player. Now, all I had to do was put them together. I asked my friend and percussive double bass extraordinaire, Scott Mulvahill, how he goes about marrying these two concepts in his music through what he calls a linear groove.
I want to hear and feel every part of the, what I'll call the grid, like the 16th note grid. And, you know, so, and it doesn't mean I'm playing like 16th notes, but I want to distribute that subdivision to different sounds between like notes that I play on the bass, sounds that I make, and you can get a variety of percussion sounds out of the upright.
Right.
So sometimes that's a kick type of sound. If I'm like, I'll use my whole fist to hit the front of the body and get a resonant, like what sounds kind of like a kick drum.
Yeah.
Or the sides or the shoulder will be more like pitter patter or slap or snare kind of sounds. And then combine that with some slides with the left hand. So like you, even if you're not re-attacking every single note you play, if you say you slide up, that's going to give you another like moment on that grid. And so when I think of linear, it's like not necessarily having to, well, I probably am playing every 16th note. It's just spread out between all those different sounds, you know? So it's, and I took that idea from like a linear drum groove where it's like, you don't, like the kick isn't playing at the same time as the hat. Instead it's boots, you know, like boots, pats, like with all those sounds happening, but not at the same time, you get this other type of sound. And so, yeah, with the percussion on the bass thing, it depends on how much you want to actually play the bass, like play the bass notes, because you can do a lot, but you only have two hands, you know, so it's, so you end up weaving it between the bass notes. And that's where I found that concept useful. It's like, how can I give the impression of a really full sound in a full grid of subdivision with just the, like what's available to you with two hands.
Scott's approach for percussive double bass as a linear drum groove in the context of a grid was revolutionary to me. The skies had parted and the creative juices started to flow. I think it's also a pretty good model for how Adam approaches his grooves as well. Committing to the backbeat and focusing on a strong 2 and 4 anchored my playing in a way that allowed me to be very creative. So I started writing. And it sucked at first. But I took it slow. And I kept at it. And by the end of month 2, this is where I was at. We're in the home stretch, the final 4 weeks. In just under a month, I'd hop on a call and, well, let's face it, probably embarrass myself in front of the best percussive double bass player in the entire world. It was crunch time. And then I suddenly realized I hadn't quite written anything yet. I'm supposed to have this video call with Adam in 27 days at this point, and I have absolutely nothing to show him. And sure, I probably could just show him the jam I wrote at the end of month 2, but that felt a little lazy, and I knew I could do better. To make it worse, I was supposed to be traveling for like most of the month. And I know what you're thinking, oh, Levi, just bring the bass with you, but no, do you know how hard it is to travel with one of these things? I mean, an upright flight case sometimes costs more than your actual bass. So instead of committing myself to financial ruin, I ended up borrowing or trying out different basses all around the country, which actually turned out to be pretty beneficial. I got my hands on this Cremona bass when I was out in California, and the action was a lot lower than my bass at home, so it was a bit more comfortable to play. But there's something about the tone which didn't quite resonate with me. It felt a little lifeless, I guess. Of course, that definitely could have just been a me problem. Still, I started to develop this idea, which brought together all the different techniques I've been learning over the past couple months. And after much refinement, I took this idea back east with me, and it became this. Wasn't quite happy with the direction of this piece though. For some reason, it just wasn't that fun to play in the hands, if that makes any sense. So I kept on trying different stuff and eventually came up with this idea. That one is interesting. It's actually very fun to play that one, but it's a little too chaotic for the ears, and the percussion ends up kind of reading more like ear candy rather than something foundational. So I went back to the drawing board and workshopped this idea based on this kind of 3 feel instead. One mildly painful hour later. This kind of had the opposite problem, where it was a little bit too percussion heavy, and it felt like he was kind of sucking all the oxygen out of the piece. I wanted to find a balance, but before I even had the chance to do so, I was whisked away to a studio session in Atlanta. Fortunately, that didn't take too long, and I returned inspired and rejuvenated, and I started working on this. Which after a few hours in the shed, turned into this. I kind of forgot about this one, to be honest, but looking back at it, I think it was probably my favorite groove that I created during this challenge. But as quickly as I came up with that, I was hopping onto yet another flight, this time to Wimberley, Texas, in order to do some sound design work on Scott's absolutely insane invention, the database. Which you should definitely check out, by the way, because it is an incredible instrument and an amazing feat of bass innovation. The link will be in the place where the links are. In what's that called? The description, that's it. While I was there, I got to try out one of Scott's K basses, and oh my God, had I been deprived. It played like butter. And this really hit home for me, the importance of investing in a quality double bass, or at least getting your bass properly set up by a professional. Throughout this process, my fingers were just absolutely wrecked, and it was really sore every time I picked up the bass. The strings on my bass are just so high off of the fingerboard, even though I lowered the bridge as much as it could go. But with Scott's bass, it was actually fun to jam on it, which makes a world of a difference. You want to have the least amount of resistance in this kind of style, and not having a smooth as butter to play bass at home was a giant setback for me being able to play the double bass with confidence. Especially since I was, well, and am still new to it, there is a million things beyond the technical content of this particular style that you have to keep in your mind all at once when playing the double bass. I'll let Past Levi on yet another borrowed bass explain. I'm finding it difficult to be very precise on this instrument, and I'm finding that I also have to be very precise. So like when I do the that kind of sound, there's a big difference between hitting it right here and then hitting it over here. So versus, and that just sounds a lot more crisp, and to be able to get that consistent is very difficult. You know, whenever I'm a mark of a good drummer, I feel like is if they can hit the snare very consistently, and it kind of just gives a very consistent, smooth sound overall. So I'm trying to do some of that here, but it's just the placement of that is so foreign to my hand. So every time I do it, you know, it kind of hits in a different place. And another thing is, if there's so many things to pay attention to, so I'm trying to do the bass with the percussion, but then I notice, oh, my elbow has dropped, and that's not good for intonation, and then I'll notice that I'll start kind of playing more in this traditional plucking pizzicato style rather than that kind of plucking, or just like the balance will be off, and there's so many things to pay attention to. It's just really hard to be able to get a good consistent sound while also making sure I have good, proper technique. You may have noticed from some of the practice clips from this month me slipping back into some old ways when it comes to the foundational stuff Jason and I went over at the beginning of this challenge. Quite frankly, I ended up abandoning proper technique in this last month altogether. This is bad. Like, objectively, this is bad. And if I had more time, I would have definitely prioritized a more methodical practice method. But I didn't have time.
Okay, this is, I don't know if this is good, but let's give it a
Shot! Yo! I had just a couple days left, so I decided that for content's sake, I just power through in my own way. I put everything I had learned in the past few months all into one last composition. Something maybe not so delicately balanced, perhaps a little rushed, but is nevertheless firmly rooted in the worlds of percussion and bass. Something that I hope is greater than the sum of its parts. Something that exemplifies the immense amount of respect I have for this beautiful instrument, this robust playing style, and for the music of Adam Ben Ezra. And with that done, there was only one thing left to do. Adam Ben Ezra, thank you so much for taking the time here. I'm a little starstruck, partially because I've just spent the last 3 months trying to figure out what the heck it is that you do, which is so amazing. But also, I think it was 2010, I saw your cover of Andy McKee's Drifting. And at that point, like, I barely even knew what a double bass was, let alone that you could do all of the percussion bits and all the bass bits at the exact same time. Little Levi's mind was blown, and you've been a huge inspiration to my playing ever since. It may have taken me like 10 some odd years to finally pick up the double bass, but I'm picking it up now because of you. And I can only imagine that thousands of others have done the exact same thing because of what you started all those years ago. So I'd just like to start off by saying thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. Very happy to inspire and to give ideas for everybody. Yeah, the journey. It's a long, long journey playing the bass. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I was saying earlier, it's the upright double bass is such a different beast. It's such a different animal from electric, and oh my God, it kicked my ass.
Yeah, yeah. After when I pick up the electric bass after playing the double bass, sometimes it feels like a toy, like a small miniature thing.
hmm
Yeah, the double bass is much more physical for sure, and the whole body is like involved.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot more comfortable. Like I've just noticed that you physically kind of play slower on it, and in some ways it's cool because it kind of makes you a little bit more methodical with your note choices. But yeah, I've definitely when I switch back to electric, I'm like, wow, I'm really good. But then I get humbled again when I go back. How did you initially get started with like the percussion? Where did that come from?
So I started playing double bass when I was 16, and I was more into jazz playing. So I was playing an old school walking bass and with trios, quartet. And then in the age of 20, I think, I've heard for the first time an album by Avishai Cohen called Adama.
Mm,
And there's one track when you hear Avishai Cohen and a group of horns, and that's it. And he drums on his bass.
yeah.
And when I heard that, I thought to myself, okay, that's a cool way of playing the bass. And I started to figure it out how to do it, just like you did.
Mm.
And I tried his kind of technique, and then I found some limitation and tried to look for other example on YouTube. So I looked on all kinds of rockabilly kind of playing, which really gave me some inspiration. I didn't like the sound so much because it was really harsh and metallic, but the technique and the way of thinking really inspired to find my own way of playing the bass.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting because the rockabilly technique is it's more so like on the strings themselves. So like taking that, and I mean it's just such a simple idea, just to take that idea and just to like move it over to like the wood of the bass and the shoulder and the body. It's really interesting. I had an idea of kind of like how you approach your pieces, which is probably in my eyes, I imagine it's probably similar to what I was saying, like Scott, how he approaches it with like thinking of it like it's a 16th note grid and you're just populating spots. Would that be correct, or do you conceptualize your music in a different way?
That's quite accurate for my technique of composing on double bass. Very similar to how you play slap on electric bass. You have your notes and you have your ghost notes in between. And basically, you play the linear 16th notes and just pick up when it's a percussive note or a regular note, or both.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I gathered through my crackpot analysis, how you get your amazing sounds. Okay, so I just have to ask, you watched some of my progress up until well now, where I showed you that last song, and it's kind of encapsulates everything that I've learned up until this point. How do you think I did?
First of all, it's very impressive for doing it for 3 months. It took me 10 years to establish this technique from the age of 16 until the age of 26 when I published my first video. Let's say if we mark this point. So in 3 months, it's very impressive. And I mean, of course, there's there are more things to learn and to develop in your technique. I don't know, maybe using 2 fingers of pizzicato rather than one. Then you can play much faster and looser in a way. Yeah.
Well, well, first off, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I think I have the benefit of being able to go and watch your videos, and so I can kind of like, that's why everything that I don't have to learn it like you learned it, where you're basically creating a lot of these ideas and a lot of these techniques. I can go back and kind of like borrow from you and borrow from Scott and borrow from Avishai and all of these people who have kind of like paved the road already. So it's a lot easier, I think to learn, with the benefit of YouTube, for sure. That's I think like out of all of the what I learned, like the hardest part of learning double bass for me was, I think, just playing good double bass. It's like, it's kind of easy to add in the percussive slaps wherever, but just to like really focus on getting a good sound and good technique on the actual bass while remaining loose and playing it in a way that feels good and sounds good. That was like the most difficult part for me. I just felt like I was very stiff always.
I can imagine. It takes time to get loosen up, and also to keep the flow, which you did quite well. The overall flow of the groove was moving quite nice, because I see on when beginners start to play the bass with percussive hits, you like imagine each note is like separated, and there's no like flow. And in your case, you could feel it's stiff, but it's flowing.
Any tips for just like how to remain loose, I guess?
Play slow,
Yeah.
very slow. I mean, when I work on new things, I I just played ridiculously slow, noticing that I'm loose. So if I'm a bit tense, then it's too fast to begin. And I just increase the BPM one by one.
Yeah. So
Just
very,
go-
very gradual.
Yeah, very gradual. You don't feel the difference. So you don't stress, you don't put more effort to play faster.
Yeah.
But in an hour or two, you can play twice faster. Playing music in a way is like doing yoga. You're
Yeah.
doing all the movement. You listen to your body. You listen to your breathing, and you don't jump to a very hard posture until you feel calm with the posture.
Yeah, that's something that yeah, definitely the with the double bass. I think more so than just electric bass. But still electric bass to some extent is like engaging the entire body into the instrument and kind of like feeling the breath as one on whatever instrument you play is really important. But something about the physicality of the double bass itself really kind of hits home that point where it's like you need to be completely in sync from head to toe with the instrument for you to be able to like get a good sound out of it, I think.
Yeah, for sure. It's totally right.
Yeah.
Working in front of a mirror is very helpful. You can see that your back is straight, and just listen to your body.
Oh yeah. But then I'd have to look at my face. I'm very curious. How hard do you think it is to pick up the double bass compared to, any other instrument?
I don't know. I mean, each instrument has its own challenges. I would say. Um, there are some instruments that at the beginning the reward is more fast, like playing guitar or even playing the piano. You just put your finger on the keyboard and there's a beautiful sound of a piano,
Mm,
which cannot be done with a bass, trumpet, or a violin.
mm.
Um, so yes, so the double bass is the in this group of instruments that the beginning can be a bit hard, but once you pass that, it goes much faster.
Right. Yeah. I think I read a comment the other day that said something like the electric bass is easy to pick up, but it takes a lifetime to master. But then when it comes to double bass, it's hard to pick up initially, and then it also takes a lifetime to master.
Maybe.
Any other parting advice for me?
Get a better bass. But yeah, no, I'm sure that it takes time.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, you're doing well, man. You're doing really, really well. Just keep on going, keep on doing it. Stay calm while playing, and you're gonna get it.
Thank you to all of my patrons who made this video possible. And a special thanks to Jason Heath, Scott Mulvahill, and Adam Ben Ezra for not only helping me with this video, but for being my double bass gurus during these past 3 months. I could not have gotten as far as I did without any of their help. Link to all of their stuff will be in the description. This video was a lot of work to produce. If you're able and would like to support that work, the best way to do that is through Patreon. Becoming a patron means early access to new video releases, extended interviews, and a microtonal music theory lecture series, all for your viewing pleasure. We await you with open arms and, of course, a whole lot of notes.